Hello and welcome to another episode of To the Bottom. Today we have our wonderful friend Jon Griffin. Hello, Jon.
Hello, everybody.
How are you?
I'm doing okay. I just want to talk about where we are. We're in Darien, Illinois, parking lot of a Walmart that I used to work at 23 years ago. So it's an interesting scene.
And what a wonderful parking lot it is. I went in there to get some coffee. Everyone's real chipper, trying to get me to buy some discounted... The funny thing is she's like, check out the discount aisle. We have some really fantastic items on discount today. And I was looking, and Easter stuff is what she was pointing at. I'm like, it's not even Easter yet. And she's like, oh, it's discounted. I was like, okay.
It's totally worth it.
Yeah, totally worth it. I'm like, I'll buy everything.
I went to college very briefly to Lincoln College. It doesn't even exist anymore. It shut down a couple of years ago. But it was in Lincoln, Illinois. That's about like 2.5 hours from here. It's like a half hour south of Bloomington, where Illinois State is. And there was a lot of like local kids, like townies. And the big thing there, because there was nothing to do in Lincoln, Friday, Saturday nights, the local kids, older people, whatever, they would go to the Walmart parking lot and park their cars and hang out. And that was it. That was like a thing.
Smoke a bunch of joints and drink a bunch of beer, huh?
Yeah, and whenever like us college kids would like go over there to like get stuff, especially like on the weekends, it would just be like tons and tons of cars because I don't necessarily blame them because that really was like your best option.
Tell me a little bit about your music background and like what got you into music.
So when I was in junior high school, the 7th grade, I got a Walkman for Christmas, and it was the old school one. Do you remember the ones that didn't even have a rewind button?
Oh, yeah.
Just had a fast forward. So if you wanted to rewind, you had to take the tape out, flip it over, fast forward, and then I got one of those, and I was like, well, I guess I have to get like a tape. So I actually got Grateful Dead, Skeletons from the Closet. I didn't really know anything about the Dead. I was like 12, but I just thought the cover was cool because it's like the girl with the rose and it's the skeleton spinning a record on one of its fingers.
When artwork was, would pull you in.
Like I dug it, and like I listened to that tape obsessively, and I'm not like a big Deadhead, but I really like the song Saint Stephen. So I was like, that was kind of like my introduction to like music that wasn't like classical or like opera or anything like that, or musicals, which is like what my dad was into, and I like that. He started playing classical music for me when I was like 7.
Yeah, cool. I was going to ask if there's what was spinning in the house.
Yeah, it was a lot of classical stuff. For some reason with my dad, ABBA was a thing. It was the magic of ABBA. It was like kind of like a greatest hits cassette that he used to listen to, but that was like the wildest he got. He liked ABBA and Janis Joplin and some Bob Dylan, but mostly it was just like him playing like a lot of classical and everything. So like my introduction to music was from my father.
Yeah.
When I was like in kindergarten probably, but like when I started like exploring and listening to stuff on my own, I was like, I was maybe, I was like, 10, 11 when I really started to, go off or whatever. So Grateful Dead was kind of like my introduction to music, but like the thing that like got me like, hey, I want music to be part of my life was Aerosmith's Rocks album.
Oh, wow.
I went into a Peaches. It's actually... where it used to be is like actually a couple blocks from where I live now. And now if any of you older kids remember Peaches, then became Coconuts. Coconuts became FYE, and now FYE doesn't even really exist anymore.
Yeah.
I went in there, and I was looking at the Aerosmith cassettes because I kind of had an idea who they were. And I was going to get Toys in the Attic or Rocks. And I was debating between the two, and Toys in the Attic has this cool cover with all this like stuff going on, but Rocks is just 5 diamonds, and that's it. And I was like, I don't think I really knew what was going on, but to me, I remember like thinking back then, I was like 12, I was like, this just looks cool, I'm going to get it. And I obsessively listened to that cassette for like a long, long time. I listened to it so much I actually wore it out and had to get another copy.
Wow.
I mean, that's how much I listened to it. And that was pretty much it. That's what was like, hey, I want music to be like a regular part of my life. At one point, I think I listened for more than a year. I listened to it all the way through every day.
Yeah.
At least once.
I think it's always so important to talk a little bit about like what was playing in the house, what got you into the first, what was your first band? For me, you're going to laugh about this one, but it was Nelson, the Nelson Brothers.
I know who they are. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I mean, well, my dad was playing the oldies in our house and stuff like that, but basically we got our first CD player. I can't even remember how old I was, but my brother and I got a little boom box, and we both got a couple CDs, and I want to say he got like, I don't know, some kind of rap. He might have got like Queen Latifah.
Queen Latifah?
And if you know Darren, that'd be pretty funny. And then I got Nelson After the Rain. And I listened to that freaking CD, same thing, like to the thing wouldn't spin anymore. And
Love and Affection. Remember that one?
Oh yeah. And so anyways, I think it's really cool to kind of see where people come from and what really gets them going on their journey in music. And so from the cassette tape, so you got into that a little bit, and then when did it start kind of branching out, getting into more music?
Trying to think of what the next turning point would be.
Like, was it influenced by friends or anything, or was it more like a journey on your own?
I mean, to be honest with you, it was more of a journey on my own. Like I kind of knew who Aerosmith was, so I think like that's why when I walked into the record store that day, that's why I'm like, hey, I'll get something by Aerosmith because that's who I kind of know. But I kind of delved into stuff on my own. It's weird. It's like I had one or two friends who I would we would go out of a way, like we would hang out and listen to music. But I discovered a lot of stuff on my own, back, when I was in junior high school, like pop metal. So some people would just say it's metal. It's not. It's pop metal. Sure. Bands like Rat and not a knock on them. I mean, I like a lot of bands that were, that are like that were like that. but I listen to like Cinderella's Long Cold Winter. I think that's a great album. I listen to a lot of Rat. Firehouse.
Oh, yeah.
If you remember those guys.
Didn't they just play like Ribfest or something?
They're still together. It's not like the original singer, but Fire. Yeah. Don't Treat Me Bad, Love of a Lifetime. Those were all big hits.
Were you watching any VH1 or MTV or anything like that? Exposure?
I watched MTV a lot. VH1, not so much, but.
What was your first rock show that you decided that you were going to purchase a ticket for?
Oh! What do you mean, like my first concert ever?
Yeah, your first concert ever.
My first concert ever was Depeche Mode in 1993. I still have the ticket stub. 1993, down in Champaign at Assembly Hall. That's I don't know if it goes by a different name now, but it was the basketball. I think it still is, just a different name. The basketball stadium there.
Yeah.
For U of I. It was Depeche Mode and the opened for them, and I was going to college at Lincoln at the time, and I didn't really, even though I was really into music at that point, I didn't really have a conscience. I was like, oh, you can go see bands play live. You just don't have to listen to them on something. I never really thought to do that up until that point. So it was really just I guess the recreation coordinator, would just post events like, hey, we're going to be doing this week. And it's like, hey, something, Depeche Mode, tickets, we're just going to drive down in the school van. I was like, all right. I was just even though I was really into music, I wasn't really into going to concerts at that point. Yeah. But I was like, oh, okay, I'll go. And it was awesome. And my first show turned me on to hey, experience music great is live. Being at home, listening to a record by yourself and just getting lost in it is great. But the musical part of being at a live show, the people watching, the people experience. I love those aspects of it. And my first concert ever, I'm not a huge Depeche Mode guy. I've got one Depeche record, still. but I loved it. My second show ever was it was about a month after that, was Cypress Hill. Mind you, this is 1993, folks. It was Cypress Hill and Rage Against the Machine opening for them at Illinois State University, and it was in an auditorium, which it was a great show, but it was just a bizarre experience because it's bizarre because those don't really seem like bands that you would go see in a theater-style setting.
Sure.
And having to, which nobody was standing. I mean, that would be impossible seeing those two bands, but it would be like, if Cypress Hill or Rage Against the Machine played at a Chicago theater. It was just odd. It was odd to see those types of bands like play there, but it was an awesome show. That was so like my first couple like experiences with like live shows just happened to be like really, really good, and that kind of like solidified the whole like music being a part of my life thing, especially live music.
Yeah. What's the best part of going to a concert? Is it hanging out with and meeting new people that are experiencing music, also themselves, or would you say it's the experience of the performance that you're watching? What is it that really moves you when you go?
I mean, it's a combination of a couple things. So like, I've been going to like concerts for like a long, long time. One of my things like now, when I talk to people, it's a venue related thing for me. So if I say like, if I know somebody and we're like both going to the same show, or they're like, hey, I'm going to see this like band, going to be at the Empty Bottle. And I was like, well, have you ever been to a show there? And they're like, no, it'll be my first one. Like I get like really excited to like, if I haven't really had to BS anybody, because whenever people brought up it's going to be my first time at this venue, can't remember it ever being like a venue that I never really like cared for. But if it's a venue that I love, and when someone tells me, hey, it's going to be my first show there, I get like really excited you're going to love it. This is the best place to stand, and make sure you talk to this bartender because they're really cool. Huh. That's been one of like my things for like a long time, when people tell me about like, their first like venue experience. So it's like, I still remember my first Metro show. Another one I still have the tickets up for is May 6th, 1995. It was a Saturday. I'm this obsessive with it. I remember like the day of the week it was. It was Mike Watt. He was headlining. Hovercraft was the first band. That was like this like weird instrumental group. It was Eddie Vedder and his wife at the time. I
don't even think I've ever even heard of that.
Oh, they haven't been a band for almost 25 years probably. They opened the show, and the middle band on that were the Foo Fighters, and it was their first tour. It was still when they had the original drummer, William Goldsmith.
Yeah.
It was their first tour. They had only been a band, I think, it was like a few months. I mean, they had like barely been a thing. I still can't remember how I got like the tickets to that show. And Dave Grohl did like double duty that night. So, the Foo Fighters were second. They played like 45, 50 minutes probably. And then when Mike Watt came out, I mean, I don't want to insult anybody, but Mike Watt, he, punk, I like to think, like punk bass player god, Firehose, Minutemen.
Yeah. He's
done like a lot of great like solo records. He was touring with Porno for Pyros last year as their bass player. So he headlined, and he came out, and Dave Grohl played the entire set with him. Half the songs he played guitar, and the other half he played drums. Eddie Vedder came out and did a couple songs with Mike Watt.
Holy shit.
So that was like a really great show. So I'm like really into like, first when it comes to music, like the first time you saw that band, or the first time, you went to a venue, or the first time you traveled out of state for a show, which I love the music aspect of it, but also like the social aspect of it. Like there's a lot of people like for the local scene, which I want to talk about a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
The social aspect, it's like there's a lot of people from the local scene. I've known them for 25 years. I don't know what their last name is, because when we were all younger, and when I first started like doing local shows like 25 years ago, You saw these people all the time. You didn't need to know their last name.
Right.
You didn't even need to know their phone number because you were just going to run into them like 2 days later when you go to like some local show. So it's not that you didn't like want their info. It's just like you didn't need it because you were always hanging out all the time. There was always a local show. Somebody in some band seemed to work at some store that you would go into all the time. So it was just like one of those things. It's like you didn't really need to know first names or numbers because you saw each other all the time and you were just like on a first name basis. But it's like, we all remember like how the local scene was for us, like late 90s, early 2000s, and we're all older now. It's like perfect example, the One Life show back in February. Your singer was like, I can't remember exactly what he said, but he said something about it. It's like, yeah, I'm still in this band, but the only difference now is it's like I've got a mortgage and like 3 kids. So it's like I've noticed that with a lot of people. It's like you're obviously not going to. It's like me, being married and having a kid. It's not going to be the same as 25 years ago. I wouldn't want it to be the same. And it's like you're going to shows all the time, and then there's like an after party. I've noticed that with a lot of people who just went to shows and, people who are like in bands. It's like, I'm still going to shows, just not as often. And like you, and it's like, you're not playing 50, and a lot of other people, you're not playing 50 shows a week because you're all older, you have kids, you have responsibilities. And I know that's kind of just how life works, but I still appreciate the fact that I can't play shows anymore. I'm older, I have responsibilities. Like, I want to... It's like, no, you can't, but I mean, and some people like, give it up just because, they just don't have as much time as they want for it, and that's fine if they do, but I'm more of like, it's like some people I know, it's like, well, I can't go to shows anymore. I'm in my 40s and I have a kid. It's like, well, if you can, and as long as you're not skirting your responsibilities as a parent or other responsibilities you have, like, who says you can't just because you're in your 40s?
Yeah, right.
I'm 50. I still, if I can help it, I still stand up front at a show. I still enjoy it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are making a lot of excuses for getting older, but really we're getting younger in my mind.
You're only as old as the lie you tell people.
Yeah, right, exactly. What happens once we're all in that room? And I think that's something that a lot of people don't talk about too much because Chicago's really magical. Like, I don't feel the same way when I play a show in Chicago as I do if I play a show in, like we just did in Malibu, California, or we are in Seattle or, New Mexico or whatever it might be. There's something about Chicago, and I don't know if it's just due to the fact that a lot of familiar faces and we've all seen each other and we all feel like family. But when we're in that room and that night happens, it's a lot more magical than, I would say, like I said, playing or performing somewhere else around the country. There's just something about being in that room with everybody. Everybody's there with a purpose, and everybody's there because they really, really, really love and want to see the faces also that are coming to the same venue.
Yeah, I mean, I think a big part of it is because it's like your hometown of it. Of course, like if you're from Chicago, you're Chicago based, you're not going to be like, well, my favorite place to play of all time is like, New York City or something. I think there are just some aspects that you really can't put your finger on, but it's magical. You can tell when you're at a show, no matter like even when show, like to me, like I've been to some like pretty bad shows, but and this analogy has been used for other things, but I think it kind of applies here. Even when a show is bad, like to me, a bad show is like pizza. Even when pizza's bad, it's still pretty good.
Yeah.
And I really value like the live experience. It's like one of the things like I always appreciate, and it's happened with me, and I've noticed this with other people. Like if there's a band playing and they're the headliner, and you see some kid in the audience wearing a shirt for the opening band, I love that. Because that's like sometimes like me, like I went to go see Porno for Pyros last year, and there's this great band from England called Tiger Cub that opened, and I wore their shirt. And there was a handful of like other people. It's like there was thousands of people there. There was like maybe like 5 people, like me and a couple other people who were there for Tiger Cub.
Yeah.
But that's like one other thing, like supporting like the local scene and like a vibe at a concert when like people are there for like the opening bands.
Right.
Because, you know, like sometimes you run into some stinkers, but, you know, most of the time they're like pretty decent. And I've definitely gone to some shows where you're like, oh, F this. I don't know who these people are. I'm just going to get there for the headlining act.
Sure.
But a lot of the times it's like, you know, you get there to support the opening acts, and it's like someone might become like the next Pearl Jam or like Nirvana or, you know, or something. I mean, because you never know. I mean, you know, like out of the 100 opening bands you see, chances are maybe not that many are going to like, or, you know, none at all are going to like headline a stadium 10 years from there. But
right.
I really like, I'm into the vibe of the music itself, but like the vibe when like you can tell people are like into a show when you see people like coming up to support the bands and it's not just like the headlining act.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never really thought about this that much before, but the emotional aspect of a show, I think, can be like a big deal.
Yeah. Was it ever boring to you that our bands, you know, I'm not going to really name names, but, you know, was it boring that we all played a lot of shows? It was the same similar bill all the time. Same bands playing with each other weekend after weekend.
I don't think so, and this is why. I think it might have to do with the time. Time and the age. You know, all of us are like in our 50s, and we were like playing like a ton of shows together. Because it's like, well, I'm not going to go see you guys because I've already seen you 47 times this week, and then I have to get up early because I've got like my kid. I think it more has to do like a time and like an age. So like when you're young, it's like when I first started going to local shows, I was probably like in my early 20s. It didn't matter. It's like, oh, I'm sorry, I can't help myself here. Backdrop. Oh, I've already seen you guys 47 times this month.
Sure.
I will go see you again because seeing, you know, Backdrop and all these other local bands, it was great. So I personally, I mean, I could see like what some people might think. It's like, well, why should I go see them? Because they're playing like 10 other shows in like the next 2 months. But I can understand why some people might think it's like a watered down thing, but because I was like really into the music and I was really into the social aspect of it and the scene, personally, I didn't mind that much at all. I mean, it's like, what's that? Backdrop is playing 10 shows Saturday. I'll go see all 10. I have no problem with that.
Looking back at it, the shows were cheap. You know, they're $5 to get in a Fireside Bowl, whatever it might have been. You know, but I think it's more about like it was like a fun place to go. That's just where the party was. Mm-hmm. No matter what band was playing, or if it was the same 4 bands every weekend or whatever. It was just about like there was this community of people coming together that wanted to see certain bands that wanted to hang out and play with other bands, and I think that it was more about. I almost want to say sometimes it was more about the hang than it really was the music, to be honest with you.
I mean, I hate to admit it. I loved a lot of the local bands. I can't really think of like any that were like, I mean, I don't think I'd name names anyway, but I honestly can't think of like, I hated those guys.
Yeah.
It definitely was. I think sometimes it was more of like a social aspect, but I didn't think there was anything wrong with, I mean, there were a lot of bands, and the social aspect was that good. So I'm not necessarily ashamed to say that, like, hey, sometimes, you know, that was like, that was like a big part for myself. And I know it was, you know, with some people, but I got into the local scene because of a job that I used to have, and a manager was like sort of indirectly responsible. So I think this was like 97, late 97, maybe early 98. I was working at a Clark gas station, if anyone remembers those. Worked there for 5.5 years, assistant manager for 1 year. I still have my name tag somewhere. And so, you know, every day in the morning, the manager, you know, would get the money, get the checks together, and she would, like, you know, take it to deposit. And it was called LaSalle Bank, which, like, then became someone, and then who knows at this point. So one day my manager, Jerry, I was there for 5.5 years. She was my third manager, and I wound up having a total of 5. Our higher ups were like always turning over. So one day Jerry comes in and she says like, hey, I know you're really into music. There's this guy who, is a teller at, the bank where you take her deposits. Hey, maybe, go talk to him one day. I was like, all right. So however long after that, one day she, had, got all the deposits together, and she had me take it to the bank just to talk to this guy. And he was telling me about his band. I was like, oh yeah, I heard you're really into music. And, yeah, Jerry's, she's really nice. And it was Phil Kosh.
Oh man.
He was a teller at LaSalle Bank. And at that time, he was in the band Special Order, which they haven't been a thing for probably like 25 years.
You got coshed.
Yeah, I got caught. I haven't heard that. Is that a thing?
That's a thing, yeah. I'm just learning.
I've known him for like 26, 27 years, and I don't know if I've ever noticed that or heard that anywhere. You got coshed.
I just learned there's a thing called you got coshed.
I'm going to have to bring that up to him.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I got into the local scene because I was coshed, and
this Phil Kosh guy, he's really getting around. He's been part of many conversations over the last 4 guests, and I know he's going to be in a lot more too. But yeah, Phil, I know Phil pretty well. I've slept on his floor, done some crazy stuff with that guy. But the kindest soul I've ever met.
He's almost too nice. Like, what's wrong with you? Who's that nice?
You want to slap him, But,
what's your game?
Yeah, I mean, that guy. Yeah, but anyway, so Phil Kosh gets you into the local music scene.
Yeah, because he was in Special Order at the time, and I started going to see Special Order shows. That was like the one local band. So that's where like it started. Then eventually a couple years later, Seraphine became a thing, and I had my first LBC show, and then Swizzle Tree, and then I remember seeing bands like Penny and the Loafers and Backdrop, who I want to say my last time I saw Backdrop, I think it was 2002, 2003. It was at the Good Times. I know I'm sucking up to the host here, folks, but it was 2002, 2003. It was, you did that show at the Good Times pub with the dog and everything, and that was when Higginson played drums for you.
Good Times pub.
It was at North Avenue on Route 83. In Elmhurst, and that building isn't even there anymore. I think it's a Goodwill.
Wait, so Mike and I have been talking about this.
It was the northwest corner of Route 83 and North Avenue.
Okay.
It was just a bar show. I can't remember it being a benefit show or not, but it was you guys, the dog and everything. Tom played drums for you. I can't remember the circumstances why. I think you or somebody else brought it up, like why he was doing drums. But yeah, he played drum. He played. That was the last Backdrop show. I saw that show at the Good Times pub where Tom played drums for you. One of my fun, wacky stories. Now, mind you, when I first started getting into the local scene, like going to like a lot of shows, I was in my early 20s, but when I started really going crazy and like going to like 5,000 shows a week, I don't know, I was probably like 26, 27. I don't even remember how I got invited. I don't know if I should have, but do you remember PGS? Singer was Joe. I don't remember whatever happened to those guys. I really dug them.
Okay.
But it was, I think, his 20th or his 21st birthday, and he was having a party at his house, and I had never heard of it. I'd heard of it, but I didn't really know what was involved. But Flippy Cup, I'd never played it before in my life. Shit. And I know probably pushing 30, I was a little bit late to that. And I was like, oh, you don't know that game? It's like, I'm sorry, I can't figure out everything. But so it was at either his 20th or his 21st birthday party at his house. I think it was in Schiller Park. It was the first time I played Flippy Cup, and the singer from Starstruck was the one who taught me how to play Flippy Cup.
Oh, man.
So a whole bunch of fond memories.
Wow.
Special Order was like the genesis. But like Seraphine was like the one who really, really got me deep into the local scene. It's like what I said with the music, like Grateful Dead, buying that cassette tape. It was like my introduction. But Rocks, the second album I bought, was like the one that like kind of like, solidified things. And the last music thing I want to talk about, and this became a thing. So like, this is the story that I had heard. I remember hearing it once or twice. Seems like it might be true. So the whole Special Order Some Talent from the song by LBC, Child's Play, where he goes, go on, step out, Special Order Some Talent. I'm not a musician. I hold my own bitch. I play the microphone. What I had heard is that the singer of Special Order, this is years ago and nobody cares. It's not like they still hate each other. But what I had heard is that the singer of Special Order had made some comments about Kastube. I can't really exactly remember details, but like he was mouthing off about him. And that's where like that whole thing about like mentioning Special Order and, putting them in that song came from. So what I started doing, I had a t-shirt that I had made up that said Special Order Some Talent. And I wore it to like every single LBC, except for one. So I've worn that to every LBC show for the past 23 years, except for one time.
So how did music lead you to stand-up comedy?
November 24th, 2008 was the very first day I ever did stand-up. It was an open mic, and it stemmed from, there's this place called the Edge Comedy Club. It wasn't an actual building. It was one of those like buildings that was like, multi-use. It's like this company, this group or whatever rents out this floor of the building. This entity has, like these rooms. And it was this place, it was at 777 North Green Street. I think it's like a church now, the whole building. But I was always really into comedy. Like I started really getting into Saturday Night Live when I was in like junior high school. So this was like the late 80s. And I never really saw live stand-up comedy like that much from the time where I first got into like watching like comedians.
Yeah.
Never really saw it live. A couple of times, that was about it. But one day I think I was just like looking at stuff online. It was like the Edge Comedy Club. We do 2 shows Friday, 2 shows Saturday. We have an open mic. And so I just started going to that. And this is while I was like still really into going to like shows. And shows at that point took priority. If I could go see some local comic and there's a band I like, 99% of the time I chose the band. But I started going to this Edge Comedy Club like a lot. Like I would be there Friday for the early 8, the late 10.
Yeah.
I'd be back there for the very next day. And I did that for like months. And the guy, Dave, who like ran the thing was like, hey, you really like coming to the shows and like, like, why don't you try it? And I just responded like, okay. It's like, me like playing like music. I never really got a thought, like people like ask me because like I talk so enthusiastically about music.
Yeah.
Like, do you play anything? It's like, no. And I just want to learn an instrument just so I could say yes to that question one day, because like people think because I'm so into music, it's like you automatically, and it always disappoints me that I have to like say no.
Huh.
So like I never really like pictured myself like being into like stand-up comedy or trying it. I just liked being an observer, going to see the shows. And so then I just like, it wasn't there. It was at this other place. I can't remember the name of it. It was on Wells. It was near where Zany's is. And that was like the very first time I did stand-up. And I was pretty active in it from the end of 2008. And then the pandemic killed it for me. Comedy still existed. There were still open mics. They were being held outdoors. Like some concerts where, everybody was wearing a mask. And I remember, like 5 years ago, they baby wipes, hand sanitizer on the microphone and the mic stand after every comic. That was just reality. So it didn't completely go away, but it killed it for me because it was like around the beginning of the pandemic, I lost my job and, making decisions with my wife on, where to live. Are we going to start a family? So comedy kind of like fell by like the wayside.
Yeah.
And it's like one of those things where it's like, if I could do comedy and it would be worth my time, maybe monetarily. Not that I'm above like, oh, I'm not going to do this unless you pay me.
Sure.
But I'm just like being honest. If I'm going to like spend time away from my family if I'm going to sacrifice a ton of sleep to go tell jokes somewhere for like 10 minutes. I'm not at the point where, I wouldn't do it for, not do a show because you don't pay me. It's just that because of, my situation, and, my responsibilities as an adult, I don't want to necessarily do stuff like that on a regular basis, and unless it was kind of worth it. And also, even if someone's like, if you want to run the show or if you want to perform, we'll give you a ton of money. The bottom line is I would have to balance it, with, my family responsibilities, my personal responsibilities. Sure. Like if I never set foot on stage again, will I be disappointed? Yeah, I will be, but it's not like I'm not going to walk around for the rest of my life. I wish I could tell another joke. I'm never going to be on stage again. It's like, I wish I could have been starting center fielder for the Chicago Cubs, but it didn't ruin my life that didn't happen, and It never was going to happen.
The good news is you are playing a show.
Yes. Oh, thank you. I wasn't even doing that on purpose.
So this Sunday, correct?
Yeah, it's at the Rock House in West Dundee, coming out of retirement, sort of. It's a benefit for the Anderson Animal Shelter. It's an animal shelter in Elgin.
Okay.
It's going to be 3 bands, I think a 4th actually, and it's going to be opening up the show, doing stand-up. So the host is going to come out right around 4. The doors are at 3 o'clock. All ages, by the way. So if you want to bring your kids out, I can't promise a G-rated show. Maybe it must PG. I'm not going to go up there and say F this and F that. Not that kind of a comic. Not that anything is wrong with that. Me personally, I don't really curse that much. But it's actually a guy that I like. The one guy that I still talk to, that I graduated, that I went to high school with. We've been talking on and off for years, and we on a rare occasion have been seeing each other for, we hang out like, the past like decade.
Yeah.
But I actually ran into him at that One Life show in February. I didn't know. I'd talked to him recently around that time. But he just happened to be there, and he was like, hey, my wife, volunteers at this animal shelter, and, I'm going to do this benefit show. Like, my band is playing, a couple other bands. Like, do you want to do it? Because he knew I do stand. He's never seen me, but he knew I did stand-up.
Yeah.
He's like, do you want to do it? Would you like to, open it, like, or something, like doing stand-up? And I said, like, yes, right away. It's a good cause. I'm an animal person. I have 2 cats and a hamster at home. So yeah, it's for a good cause. It's at the Rock House in West Dundee. Doors are at 3. The show starts at 4. The host is going to come out, do a little bit of time, and then I'm going to open. And it's for a good cause. It's all ages. It's $10 to get in. You get a raffle ticket with that. You can. There's a lot of cool raffle prizes from like local businesses. Food. Tickets to the Kane County Cougars.
Yeah.
So there's a raffle. You can purchase additional raffle tickets. There's a silent auction. So it's all for a good cause. And I had this idea, and I always thought that I'm sure band people have done this just to be funny. I can't think of any particular story, but it would be like, let's say, Radiohead, who I really, really like. Like if Radiohead was like playing a show, and Tom York, just to be funny, wore a disguise. Not a ridiculous disguise where like people might think, like, who is that? Or is that like some sort of like guy like trying to like hide who it really is? Like if Tom York, if Radiohead did a show and then Tom York like bought a ticket to his own show and waited in line like the entire time and like went through the gates, that's what I'm going to do for this charity show. It's like, I could go through the backstage entrance. I'm on the show, but
sure.
I think, I don't think I normally go out of my way to do this, but it's for a good cause. So I always think it'd be funny to do that. I'm gonna buy a ticket for my own show, and I'm gonna just wait in line.
I love it.
And I'm gonna get in line 3 hours early, so I'm the first one. I always like to be first.
What would be even better is if you pitched a tent overnight. That would be incredible. This Sunday, is there a website promoting the show at all?
No, there's not a web. I mean, it's on the Rock House. It's on the Rock House website.
Okay.
But
I'll
like,
look it up.
but other, there's a Facebook event. I'm posting it on my wall.
Okay. We'll share it onto the bottom as well.
Oh, thank you. I'll get you a link for that.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I think is like the big deal, and yes, this is really sappy, but you know what? I'm going for it anyway. I'm going to go out on a limb and get sappy. So, as far as like comedy goes, I peaked as far as I've done a lot. I've done a lot of good. I've had a lot of good shows. I've had some like really nice crowds. I've had everything from performing for one person when I showed up to a mic, and I was the only comic to show up to this open mic. So I was like, "Is anyone else going to show up?" He's like, "I know it's not looking so good." So it just wound up being me and the host. The host went up for 5 minutes, and then I went up and did like 10 minutes for the host, and we were the only ones in the room. And then there have been other shows where like I've been in front of like 250 people in like a packed comedy club.
Yeah.
And it was awesome. You know, it's like the thing with like a band. It's like, does it suck if there's only like 10 people in the audience? Yeah, but you know, you got a job to do. You're there. You can't let it get into your head.
Yeah, I'm there for a different reason. Now, I don't know, you know, how it is with stand-up. Obviously, I think stand-up's a little bit different because you're there more performing to... you know, you're entertaining, you're putting on a show. I mean, they're both the same thing, but you're literally trying to make people laugh and whatever. You need a crowd there for that, you know. With music, it's kind of like I'm personally playing music because it's therapeutic for me. Mm-hmm. So I'm getting up there, and if I'm singing to the bartender, it's a little weird, but I'm still enjoying myself because it's something about just being able to play and let go. With a crowd connecting is obviously way more special, and that's what you want. But, you know.
I mean, it's like I felt like the same way, like... you know, I imagine the same way, you know, with like musicians. You do it because you enjoy it.
Right.
But if you're having a bad day or if the crowd is off, it gets to a point where, and there's nothing wrong with it, it gets to a point where like it's therapeutic. And I definitely remember having some performances where, you know, I get into an argument with my girlfriend or... you know,
becomes part of the show maybe.
Yeah, or I have like, you know, like a bad day at work and I like really don't want to perform, but you're like, I'm going to do it anyway. It's like you want to do things just to do it. But sometimes if you've had a tough time, it definitely becomes therapeutic. And like I've definitely had a few shows where it's been like I've had like a really crappy day. This happened. I don't want to do this. I'm just going to skip it, but you do it anyway. And most of the time I've had a few times where it's like, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. It could be a risk where it's just going to make things worse. But most of the time where I've been in a situation where maybe I should just plow through and do this for like therapeutic reasons. And it's worked out. It's actually been beneficial. And, you know, times like that are great. And when you have like a really big crowd, you know, I definitely remember those times. And I've gotten to work with some like pretty good comics, not like TV, like famous, like stuff like, by TV famous or like popular, I mean like, let's say there's like 10 comics someone would know. They're not necessarily like TV famous, but you're really into comedy. You go see a lot of comedy shows. You watch a lot of stuff online. These comics might not have a show. They're not necessarily household names, but they're popular because, you know, you go see comedy shows a lot and they're popular because a lot of people come see them, they're not necessarily popular to the casual comedy fan who might only know this comic because
like a lot of our
they
bands,
see them
like
on
Backdrop
show.
or, you know, I mean, we're not a worldwide famous band, but, you know.
So I've never gotten to, like, let's say, work with, like, anybody, like, famous per se, some pretty popular, like, local comics. But one time I got to open for a guy who opened for Carrot Top. So that's like halfway. That's like almost opening
You're
for
halfway,
Carrot Top. I'm halfway there. But I think like as far as like comedy goes, like non-comedy related, and to me, it's a thing that I like to think about. It's like I peaked with this, I think, honestly, in a way. So I used to run a show. I've run some pretty good shows. I ran a show at the Double Door for like 3 years.
Okay.
Missed that place, by the way.
Yeah.
Hated Wicker Park. Still do.
Do you think the new one's going to be cool?
The new Double Door has been in like development hell for like years. It's like they've been talking about like opening, and I don't know if it's going to happen. I like it. I mean, the space is cool. I hope it does happen. And I ran a show. Hosted and co-produced with someone at the House of Blues up in the Foundation Room for a couple of years.
Oh, nice.
And what turned out to be my last show there, it was one of those things where I think it was, I never got to talk to someone to plead my case because like it wouldn't do any good, and they kind of like, you know, pressured me into like, it's not going to do any good. And then I got sick of like trying to look into it, like, yeah, whatever. It was like one of those things, well, it's not coming from me. It's coming from the person above me who you can't talk to, but I'm speaking for them.
Yeah.
This is your last show. So what wound up being and I was notified that night.
Oh, geez.
And I like pleaded, it's like, let me do another show. So I know it's a final show. I'll pack the place. We'll go all out. I never got to do it. But I booked a comic. Her name's Danette. I haven't seen her or talked to her in years. But she's indirectly responsible for this. So I had booked her, and someone came out to support her. So Danette was like, hey, I'm doing this show with Foundation Room House of Blues. Why don't you come check it out? And so they did. So I'm up there at some point, and it's in between comics, and I noticed this person like in the audience, and some comic had just gotten done with their son. I was like, hey, let's give it up for so-and-so. And I got up there, I told some joke, and I was like, look, I know you're probably really bothered, and you look like you don't want to be bothered, but I have to tell you, you're the hottest dork I've ever seen in my life. And that turned out to be like my future wife. She had worked with the girl at a hotel that the girl, Danette, that I had booked, and that's why she came out to support. And I actually said that. I feel bad, but I can't remember how I think she kind of just like, it wasn't a disaster, but I think like initially in the moment, I think she kind of like semi-nervously like laughed it off.
Sure.
So I did the rest of the show. I talked to her afterwards. I obviously was flirting now. Just to be clear, I had a girlfriend at the time. She had a boyfriend at the time. Later on, we had a discussion like afterwards. Both of our relationships were on the way out at that time. It was one of those, were we still officially dating? Was I flirting with someone while I had a girlfriend? I guess technically I was. But it was just a technicality. The writing was on the wall with hers. The one with mine, like we had recently, the girl that I was dating at that time, we had been on a break where it's like, okay, so what does a break mean? We can't see each other, we can't call, but we can text, but we can't message on Facebook. It was like a whole thing. I don't think breaks are necessarily a death sentence every time, but it's usually never a good sign, depending on the situation. Like, we need a break. So I knew the writing was on the wall, basically. So that's why I didn't really care about flirting with her or messaging her the next day on Facebook, which I did. And so we had talked talked here and there for like a couple of weeks. And because I know we've been at this for a while, so I'll give you the short version. We wind up becoming official however many months. I can't really remember exactly because it was like one of those things where you're like, oh, are we official? And it just kind of like happened. We never like, hey, let's make this solid. We never had that discussion. It was just like, oh, I guess we're a thing now. And that's just kind of how it happened. So, we made it official sometime in early 2016. I wound up proposing to her a couple years later. Did it the old-fashioned way. Actually drove to her parents' house. And so I did it the old-fashioned way. I asked her, hey, permission to... And we were living in it was an apartment that she lived in. I had a house that I kept, but I just basically moved in all my stuff, a lot of my stuff. And she was like, one day she was like, she looked around. It's like, I've got clothes in her closet. I've got shoes on the floor near the front door. She's like, are you living with me? And it's like, I guess. It just kind of happened.
Yeah, it just kind of
I moved in my stuff. And she totally knew what I was doing. Like, I wasn't that slick about it. I was like, oh, I have to go over to your parents to talk about something. She, figured it out right away. She told me later. And then I got down on one knee. And then we got married on May the 19th. May the 4th, 2019. We're big Star Wars people.
Yeah.
For those people who don't know, maybe some of you don't. May the 4th. Get it? May the 4th be with you.
Oh, yeah.
We weren't necessarily going to choose that date, but we were looking at the calendar in 2018, and we noticed May the 4th just happens to be on a Saturday. It'll be easier to do the wedding on a weekend.
Sure.
So we got married on May the 4th, 2019, and that's really so. Comedy and me booking this comic, we're indirectly responsible for, me being married and having a daughter. So if I never set foot on stage again. Hey, it worked out for me. Let me put it to you that way.
Wonderful story. I mean, that's the thing. It's going back to the beginning of the conversation. It's all about connection, right?
Sure.
Who knew that a Walkman, and years later, after going to shows and meeting people, and then you dabbling with doing stand-up and something, trying to find yourself in this comedy world that would lead you to your wife and your family and your daughter. And, and here you are still going to shows. And here we are having a podcast talking about all the years past.
That's just how like a lot of things in life work. It's like with you, like, back in the day when you were like first doing flyers, it's like, oh, well, I got to promote my show. I'm going to write up this like flyer. I mean, you enjoy doing it, I think, but you don't necessarily appreciate it until like years later, because you like look back and it's like, that really worked out. You don't really, I think you can appreciate certain things in the moment, but with certain things, it's like you don't think about it until like years later. It's like, I don't care if I ever step on stage again. That's how I met my wife. Or it's like, wow, I remember when I used to have to go to Office Max to make flyers for my shows. It's like you really appreciate how you had to do. Yeah, you appreciate the process. You appreciate how you had to do certain things, especially when you were a lot younger.
Yeah. Last thing, I know you got to get going probably. What is your process for writing stand-up?
I mean, I take it from like it's really like a couple different things. So there are some jokes that I remember really well, but I can't remember what inspired them. But like with this particular one, I remember what the inspiration was for the joke, but I can't remember the joke itself, and I've forgotten this for years, and it's making me nuts. So I hope one day, like if I ever want to resurrect this bit. So I was watching TV with my father one time at my parents' house, and there was this reporter that came on and was talking about some news story. I forgot what it was. Really attractive, like girl, I think probably 30s, long blonde hair, like really, really attractive. And my dad had made the comment because I think she was like doing some like story about like, Afghanistan or the war in Iraq. And he always seemed like kind of like a straight shooter kind of guy. But every once in a while he would say something wacky or do something goofy. So we were watching this news report, this attractive, female, long blonde hair reporter, talking about something to do with the war. And he actually said, boy, it'd be a shame if she went to Iraq and they cut her head off. I was like, I mean, that'd be disappointing if that happened to anyone, no matter what they look like. I don't think their looks should matter. But I remember like, he just like, I was like, it's just such a bizarre comment. And I wrote a joke about that. I was like, I never really, no one's ever really asked me that, so I'm sorry I can't give you a better answer. But
no, I mean, I think that's fine. I think like, I'm always kind of curious. I like to think I'm kind of a funny guy once in a while. But I have this really good camaraderie with Mike, and I like to think we're pretty funny together. And sometimes the reason why Mike and I are friends is because we're the two guys that are in a conversation with other people, and everyone's looking at us like, who invited Mike and Eric? Like we're not allowed to be there because we're just so off the wall in our thinking and the way that we talk. I
can appreciate that because I think I've met Mike and I've talked to him, so I don't. We're doing this again when he comes back. So. Oh, I would love to.
Yeah, he's definitely disappointed he wasn't able to be here. So.
But it sounds so like the impression that I'm getting, I get a really strong impression that it's like you and him have like a really good rapport.
Yeah.
It's like my friend Andrew that I mentioned. I've known him since the 5th grade, so like 40 years. I went to that Pearl Jam show with him. I think when my wife, well, she wasn't my wife at the time, but the first time that she met Andrew. And I think like after the first like maybe one or two times, like after hearing, she's heard me talk to him on the phone. I still remember this. She made the comment, I get why you two are friends. Mm-hmm. Because, she didn't totally get it, but she could, she didn't really understand it, but she totally got like we have why we have some sort of rapport together.
Oh yeah, the quirkiness, your style of
our sense of humors are kind of sometimes like I get why you two are friends. You both are kind of like goofy in like a certain way. So, yeah. I mean, I don't necessarily base my comedy. I don't really necessarily have like one specific method, but I like taking personal shit or personal stuff. as an inspiration. If there's somebody does something ridiculous, like in the news, like Florida Man, which I know is kind of like low-hanging fruit, but I remember Robin Williams, his character in the movie Good Morning Vietnam, had made the comment about someone, and he said, they're just screaming out to be made fun of. And even though it's sometimes people are low-picking fruit, they deserve it.
Yeah.
So if somebody does something wacky in the news, I kind of like base my stuff on that, any kind of like personal thing, my dad says something goofy. So I take my inspiration, I guess, from a few different places.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you just kind of you take your everyday inspirations and you just kind of put your flair on it. And
sure.
You tell a story, but in your quirky, cute way of being able to get people to get a little chirp out of them.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Well, when Mike gets back, he's in the Philippines right now. I don't know where exactly they are today, but then they're going to
Australia, right?
Australia, and the Plain White Tees are on tour right now for the next month. Then they come back, and he's home for a short window. It may only be like 3-4 days, and then they're back out again. I'm kind of Mike-less for a little while, but when he gets back, I know he really wanted to be here. We have to do this again, and I think we'd love to have you back. And
I would do it. It would be an honor.
Yeah,
that'd be awesome.
Get into the more wacky side of life and what makes us chirp.
Yeah, we kind of like. I know we talked a lot about music. We talked a lot like comedy, but like we can make the next show like Seinfeld. It'll be about nothing. We'll just talk about nothing in particular,
which is the best ones, to be honest.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Well, thank you so much, John.
Oh, hey, it was a pleasure to be here. I mean, we're in this RV in the parking lot of a Walmart that I used to work at. Can't get any better than that.